Jesus said, I am the resurrection and I am life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, yet shall they live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I hold the keys of life and death. Because I live, you shall live also. Friends, we are gathered here to praise God and to witness to our faith as we celebrate the life of Bernard Ashe. We come together in grief, acknowledging our human loss. May God grant us grace that in pain we may find comfort, in sorrow, hope, in death, resurrection. I invite you to rise as you are able as we sing together our first hymn. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. We can rise as you're able as we join together in our call to worship. It's found in your bulletin. Let's join in unison. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. We do live to ourselves. We do not die to ourselves. If we live to the Lord. And if we die to the Lord. So then, whether we live or die, we are the Lord's. For to this end Christ died and lived again, so that he might be Lord of both the dead and the living. And now let us join in singing together our opening hymn, number 140, Great is Thy Faithfulness.
In the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but I do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Love never ends. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. And as for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to the childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, and the greatest of these is love.
We invite the right Twigs to come forward to share a solo at this time.
Why should I feel discouraged? And why should the shadows come? Why should my heart feel lonely and long for heaven and a home? When Jesus is my portion, my constant friend is He. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches over me. His eyes on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. I sing because I'm happy, and I sing because I'm free. For His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. I sing because I'm happy, and I sing because I'm free. For His eye is on that little sparrow.
Yes.
And I know
Before each who will be sharing, I invite you to come right up and speak here from the pulpit. And we'll start with Randolph Treese.
To Nanette, Walter, David, the Ashe family and friends. I am so honored to have been asked to share some reflections on Bernard Ashe, who I admired greatly. Now, I know and I see there's a number of lawyers who will be speaking. The most dangerous person with a mic is a lawyer. But when you think about the immensity of Bernard's life, there's just not sufficient time to recount his majestic odyssey. And my reflections will fall short of what he achieved and what his life deserved. So when I graduated from law school in 1976 and became a lawyer, the first person that I recognized as the most visible, highly placed and successful Black lawyer in the Capital District region was Bernard. And then I had the pleasure of meeting him and being in his presence and hopefully developing a friendship. And what I observed was his poise, his professionalism, his grace, his demeanor. And I tried to find some similarities between him. Well, for example, we were both lawyers, but he was a titan in the profession, and I just wanted to be recognized as a peer. Obvious to many of you, we're both short of stature. So it's always a treat for me to be able to see somebody eye to eye rather than looking up. But to be in his presence was to be in the presence of a giant. And for those who know me, my voice is soft, and so was Bernard. And people used to say to me the only way they heard me was to read my lips. But when Bernard spoke, you understood every word he said and everything that he meant. He was a person of courage. He was a person of unflagging intellect, and I was so impressed with that. But I was more impressed with his kindness, his talent, and his time he would spend with us. So I would always avail myself of his advice, and he would entertain my entreaties, and he never failed. And I could go on and tell you about a number of those, but he always provided the advice I needed at that time. And he was so encouraging to me, and he was encouraging to me when I sought to be a judge. But one of the things that impressed me the most was his courage. And you know, some of us know that to be the only person of color in the room is daunting. And he was always the only person of color in the room. And when I think about that, and I think about what Abe Lincoln said, that a person who adheres to his conviction can be a majority of one. And as we know, Teddy Roosevelt basically said, the person who is in the arena with his face mired with dust and salt and the like is a person to be recognized. Some of us, we recognize his intellect, his demeanor, but one of the things I thought was very charitable of him is his sly humor. And it would be interesting, he wouldn't be up telling a joke, but he would share something with you, and you could look him in the eye and you would see this glimmer that he gets the joke even if you don't get the joke. In my view, Bernard had a boundless heart. If he was here, he would disagree with me, but he was a trailblazer. He was a treasure. He embodied the human spirit. And he was just a person of great magnitude. And his journey is the journey that we all should pursue. So I think it is an honor for me to be able to celebrate his life and to acknowledge the wonder of this man. Thank you.
Had a lot of notes.
Bernard King.
I am not Bernard King, but Nanette asked me to read Bernard's letter. My name is Rich Casagrande. I'm one of the many, many lawyers who got his start. Bernard hired me as a law clerk in 1974, and it was the best possible way to start a legal career. But Bernie is an attorney, a prominent attorney in New York who's worked with Bernard for decades. And he wrote to Nanette when he learned of Bernard's passing. Nanette, I was shocked to hear of Bernard's passing. I had just talked with him on February 28th. He had called me to wish me a happy birthday. He was always faithful about remembering my birthday and calling me. I'm sure he tried to keep in touch with many of his friends this way. While I can't be at his service in person, I want to pass along some thoughts about this extraordinary man. Bernard and I have been close friends for many, many years. We are both union labor lawyers. I met him when he first came to Albany from the West Coast. He had been a labor attorney with United Auto Workers and was coming to Albany to serve as general counsel for NYSEG, which had recently become a full-fledged union in the public sector. He asked me to work with him primarily in the many benefit programs NYSEG was setting up for its affiliated locals. We worked very closely from that time until his retirement. He was a pleasure to work with, but our relationship did not stop there. We were both very active in both the New York State and American Bar Associations, initially in the labor law sections and more broadly thereafter. He became chair of the labor law section of the ABA, and I worked with him in that activity. He was an outstanding chair and led the section in many new and creative ways. He made a name for himself and also in the larger ABA. I later became chair of the section, and Bernard was always there to help. The ABA recognized his talent, and he was soon involved in the work of the Board of Governors and its many activities. I also became involved in the main ABA and served on the Board of Governors. Fellow leaders of the bar began to urge him to seek the presidency. He agreed to run and asked me to be his campaign manager. He would have become the first attorney of color to assume that role. We waged a great campaign and came very close to winning. To say Bernard was an outstanding lawyer in person would be an understatement. He was also consumed with bringing the young lawyers on his staff to be the best of their ability. He was a great positive force in the professional life of many young and not so young lawyers. But he never forgot that his family was first. Family and friends were his first priority. We are all going to miss him. But whether family or friend, we acknowledge that his presence has enriched our lives. Sincerely, Bernard King.
Kevin Herron.
Good afternoon. I'm one of those not so young lawyers that was mentored by Bernard. It's an honor to be here. Annette and the entire Ashe family, thank you for allowing me to say a few words. I'd like to kind of speak on behalf of those young lawyers who Bernard mentored. He arrived at New York State United Teachers with no legal staff. He came on board and he assembled a group of lawyers, administrative staff that for the next 25 years created a lot of law. I know there's a lot of lawyers here today. And for those of you who are in private practice, I want you to think, what would a career in the law be like if your only job was to go out and represent your clients to the best of your ability. Nothing else. You didn't have to worry about budget, about staffing, about dealing with your partners or your associates. And in the event that an unfavorable decision from a court arrived, you didn't have to call your client and say, I think this was an unfavorable decision, and then an appellate court might look at it in a different way. And if you pay us several thousand more dollars, we can take it up. It's nice that we didn't have to do any of those things. Bernard dealt with all of that stuff. What a wonderful job we had. Our entire task was go do the best you can do. We thank him for that. Mentioned the people that he hired. Somehow he took a diverse group of lawyers, administrative staff, and turned us into a cohesive group, loved each other like a family. And you wonder how that could be done. That could be done because Bernard personally picked every one of us. He knew what he was doing. He made it work, and we thank him for that. Now, I could go on my narrative and talk about great things he did, but Judge Treese and Bernie King have already mentioned some of those things. And as I got to thinking about how I could remember Bernard, it came back that he spoke in riddles sometimes. He was a man of few words. And it was the quotes that I remember. The quotes that lasted long after he first uttered them to me, and often he uttered them to me throughout my career. I just want to talk about three of those quotes. The first one, I was a law clerk. Rich Casagrande was here. He said that he was hired by Bernard as a law clerk in 1974. When Rich became an attorney with NYSET, I was hired to replace him as a law clerk. And I was sitting one day in the library doing some research. Now remember, you have to understand, when you're in law school, the first year is the curriculum is common law, property, contracts, torts, all these areas in which there is great tradition. And if you look long enough, you will read hundreds and thousands, if you want, of cases with binding precedent about what a particular thing means. So I had some familiarity with that. And when I got to NYSET, I was asked to do some research on some issue of public sector labor law. And I'm toiling away in the library, surrounded by the books. And Bernard happened to walk by and says, how's it going? I said, not well. He said, there's no precedent here. How can I make an argument there's no precedent law here? He said, Kevin, when we're finished, there will be precedent. Lo and behold, he was right. After completing law school, I was lucky enough to be hired by Bernard into the Office of Counsel. And I ventured out to argue the cases. And I remember one time I don't even remember the name of the small town I was in, but the courthouse was being renovated, and so court was being held upstairs over the hardware store. And I make my argument, and I sit down. My opponent, who was a local attorney, stands up, and the judge looks at him and says, so Bob, what do you think about Mr. Herron's argument? I said, this is not going to go well. And sure enough, that decision came down soon thereafter, and the judge not only denied the relief that we were seeking, but went on to say that my argument amounted to nothing more than a cat chasing its own tail. Ooh, that hurt. I was grousing about that back in the office and mentioned it to Bernard. He just looked at me and said, Kevin, that's what appellate courts are for. Wow. He changed my attitude. What are courts for? I had thought that being a young attorney, it was enough that I knew what the law was. Bernard said, no. It's not about what the law is, it's what you want it to be. It's your job to go out and make it happen. It was a great lesson. The third quote, one I'll never forget. It was early in the 80s. The AIDS crisis, AIDS epidemic had hit. And there was all this concern. What do we do? How are we going to deal with it? What's going to happen in the medical world? How do we deal with it in the workplace? And I came across a brochure. And there was going to be a seminar on AIDS in the workplace. I said, wow, that's kind of interesting. It's a very current topic. So I took that brochure into Bernard's office and said, Bernard, this is coming up in a few weeks. I'd like you to okay my attendance at this conference. He said, oh, okay. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I got a call a couple of days ago asking me to speak at that conference. I don't want to do it, so you speak at it. I said, and Bernard, I don't know anything about it. And one more time he came up with a quote. He said, neither does anyone else. Go figure it out. And I did the best I could do. I remember speaking and I ended up on a panel dealing with what do you do with bodily fluids that are spilled in a classroom? I said, well, maybe you just wear rubber gloves and you deal with it. And people were saying, oh, that's crazy. Does that mean that we need to have first aid kits in every classroom? Yeah, I think that's what that means. And I still didn't know much about AIDS in the workplace, but somehow after that, I kept getting calls as if I was the expert. And Bernard made me the expert that day. Still didn't know a lot, but people thought I did. That was, it worked for a while. And some Bernard taught us, Bernard trusted us. He let us go into appellate courts where we probably didn't have the experience or the confidence to do it. But we did it anyway, and we made a lot of law. He inspired us. And throughout it all, he was a great friend. I will miss him.
Timothy Taylor.
I'm also not Tim Taylor. Anyway, Tim, for those of you who know Tim, he's a wonderful attorney and arbitrator and also someone Bernard mentored. And he sent this note to Annette, Walter, David, and family. Thank you for sharing Mr. Ashe with us. I first met Mr. Ashe at the annual Albany County Bar Association's Court of Appeals dinner in 1988. It would take me 30 years to call him Bernard. Mr. Ashe and I would go to that dinner together for years. In 2008, we were seated together for dinner in a packed room. The Court of Appeals judges were there, as was the first woman to serve on the court, Chief Judge Judith Kay. Mr. Ashe asked me to go up to her and say hello. Even though he had retired from NYSET in 1996, he was still my boss, and I followed his orders. That's very true. I did it till the end as well. I approached the chief judge and passed along Mr. Ashe's message. She sprang to her feet. "Where is Bernie? Is he here?" I told her he was, and she locked arms and said, "Take me to him." Walking across the room, arm in arm, the crowd stared and parted like Moses at the Red Sea. Arriving at our table, she and Mr. Ashe embraced. She sat down and the two laughed and giggled like school children. The two had grown close based on his many appearances before the court and their shared work with the Lawyer-Client Reimbursement Fund. Mr. Ashe was the epitome of what a lawyer could be. He loved the law and saw it as a vehicle for social change. I tried to follow. We all tried to follow. He was the finest lawyer I ever knew and a better friend than a lawyer. I told him I loved him as often as he would allow. May he rest in peace. Your friend, Tim Taylor.
Robert Riley.
Good afternoon. I'm Robert Riley, and yes, I'm another lawyer. I want to thank Rich. Rich said he would read my speech as well, but I thought I would do it myself because I am honored to be here with Nanette and the congregation. I am the current General Counsel for New York State United Teachers, or NYSE. Bernard was the first. So I'm here on behalf of NYSE, its president, Andy Pallotta, our 600,000 members, and especially our Office of General Counsel, to extend our sincere condolences on the passing of Bernard Ashe. And I speak also for myself, and just reflecting and sort of, as the program says, witnessing Bernard's life. That's what we're doing. So more than 40 years ago, Bernard established our Office of General Counsel at NYSE. He was the very first General Counsel. He held that position for 25 years. And as was already mentioned, developed the respect of the chief judges, the bar associations, the entire legal community. And for us at NYSE, he laid the foundation. He laid the foundation on which our office continues to stand. He built the structures that we still use. He set the standards that we still follow. He laid out the ideals that we still hold dear. Essentially, we carry the torch that Bernard lit all those years ago. And as Kevin and some of the others have mentioned, 40 years ago, the Taylor Law, which is New York State's public sector labor law, it was brand new. It was brand new at that time, right? It had just come on the books. And Bernard's influence on how that law would be interpreted and applied is still felt to this very day. Many of the most important cases, as Kevin has pointed out, went up to the Court of Appeals. Many of the most important cases in this area of the law have Bernard's name listed as counsel on that case. He was an advocate for working people his entire career. That's what he set out to do, and that's what he did. He represented working people, no matter if they were auto workers or if they were teachers. They were blue collar or white collar. All union members have benefited from Bernard's advocacy. But, and our other speakers have touched upon this as well, it was not just the law itself, not just the law itself that interested Bernard, but it was the why. and the how we practice law. Because while Bernard no doubt was a fearless litigator, Bernard was a compassionate human being, always helping those in need, whether they were union members, whether they were staff, whether they were his friends or his family. He took care of everyone. He took care of them all. In some ways, Bernard has not left the office of general counsel. To this day, we have Bernard's portrait picture hanging in our law library, not far from all those books with his name in them. To me, though, that portrait honors not only Bernard's memory, which it surely does, but also his expectations. Bernard demanded that we live up to the highest legal and ethical standards. Nothing less would suffice. But he not simply demanded, he modeled it. He was a leader, he was a mentor, he was a supporter, and all the while, he was the consummate gentleman. And Bernard's leadership transcended our office and extended to the larger legal community. He was active and took leading roles in the American Bar Association, State Bar Association, County Bar Association, and many other organizations. He certainly believed in giving back to his community. Now, the last time I spoke with Bernard, we were sitting at a table with some of the other general counsels who held the position and some of the other lawyers who worked with us over the years. And after acknowledging that it was indeed challenging times for NYSET as well as the labor movement, Bernard encouraged me. He encouraged me to continue the fight, but not just a fight, but to do so with dignity and earned respect. Looking back, I wish I had the opportunity to spend more time with Bernard over the years. I still have his portrait, but I believe I have much more than that. Not only do I have the legal precedents that we mentioned that he set, but with his memory, I believe I have an example as to how to practice law, why to practice law, and I have an example of a life well lived. Thank you.
Samuel Fleming.
Good afternoon. I'm the youngest of 5 siblings. Bernard was 15 years older than I. And role model, I can't touch this. But Bernard had a thing where my mother, if this is to be, it's up to me. And I guess he carried on the same message. Don't be weary, don't be afraid, and never give up. And that's what I seen in my brother about family. He definitely was #1 with family. And I try to continue on that family, that American spirit, I call it, that's very rare today. And I just know I'm happy inside because I know he's up there with family and friends. And that it makes me calm because answering the call of God is something that we all have to do one day. And that he has answered, and he's will always be in my memory. And I just want to thank you guys.
David Ashe.
I had every intention of doing this from memory, but I'll have to cheat a little bit here. There are two different kinds of people. There are those that care about themselves and how the world around them affects them. And then there are those that care about others and how to affect the world around them. And for sure, my father was one of those who cared about others and tried to affect the world around them. When those two types of people interacted with my father, they usually had slightly different experiences. But whether out loud or not, it was usually followed up by 5 words. How did he do that? So my father wasn't shy about sharing stories. So at the UAW, he had a boss who was looking for a photocopier. And I've got to make the assumption that he had made attempts to get that photocopier, but wasn't able to. So he talked to my father and was asking him if he was able to get the photocopier. And pretty soon after, a brand new photocopier showed up. Based on some other stories I've heard about this person, I can just kind of imagine this accusatory tone of frustration. Said, "How did you do that?" Plenty of other stories or cases or law had people using a slightly different tone, one of amazement and wonder. How did you do that? Like he was this master magician. At one point, the UAW was very short on cash and they needed a lot of it and they were kind of stuck. Not only was Solidarity House the union's pride and joy, their headquarters, and also a place where a draft of Martin Luther King's I Had a Dream speech was written. But it was a very large asset. I can't quite remember, but I think it was the Teamsters that he made a deal with to buy Solidarity House, and they gave the UAW the money that they needed. Also giving them the ability to stay and use the facility, but they got the cash that they needed. He was also able to arrange for the first right of purchase for that building so that if the Teamsters ever decided to sell the building, the UAW would get the first chance to buy that building back. They have the building back, by the way. Magicians know that there really is no magic, only the ability to make people see what they want them to see. He was part magician, but he was also part gladiator, going to work every day with his pen as his sword and the law or legal pad as his shield. He had this mystique about him, but it was forged from a deliberate, methodical approach, a masterful understanding of the law, and a series of impressive relationships that won him case after case after case. His relationships were important to him, whether it was justices, congressmen, colleagues, friends, the head of the United Auto Workers, Walter Reuther, or the first Black governor of the state of Virginia, Douglas Wilder, who he just called Dougie. I guess on the topic of firsts, I don't know whether he knew or just didn't say, but his father, my grandfather, was the first Black student enrolled at Villanova. His relationship with his family saved his life, almost literally. Walter Reuther wanted my father to go with him to the UAW retreat at Black Lake, but it was Mother's Day weekend, and he wanted to stay home. Family was always important to him. On May 10th, 1970, Mother's Day, Walter Reuther, his wife, his bodyguard, one of his friends, and both pilots died as the plane they were on crashed while landing at the airport near Black Lake. It wasn't until recently that within the last few years I really truly understood what my father did. There was a teacher at our local high school who had planned to show a video in their classroom. And he did everything he possibly could to make parents comfortable with the showing of that video and to make arrangements with their child if they didn't want their child to see the video. Well, the video was shown, parents complained, and although administrators aren't a group that NYSA represents, the rest of the story kind of gets the point across. The principal supported the teacher, and the school district fired the principal. So I don't know if it still works this way or not, but had it been one of NYSA's members, someone in the general counsel's office would be there to find out what happened and to defend them. He loved his family, and that included his wife of just short of 60 years, his brothers and sisters and their spouses and family, Rosemary and her family, Wendy and her family, and especially his grandchildren, Ricardo, Miguel, and Aech. And even though he never got a chance to meet her in person, it included Laurel. I will miss his stories, especially one of his favorites, when he claims that I ran to him saying, "My brother started a fight, he hit me back." But most of all, I'll just miss him.
And Walter.
Good afternoon. I didn't really get a chance to get the experience you have with some of these, so I tried to Google search how to write a eulogy for your father and reflect on his life. And I think I've done that. Look for patterns, and I don't think he meant some of the clothes that were in some of the video, especially his 70s outfits, but I think he meant other things. Gathered biographical information. And we were able to do that as part of the obituary that's in the bulletin. And so now I'm supposed to write an opening. So I'm Walter Ashe. Bernard was my father. I was the one that hit back. I mean, it's a story. And I'm not an attorney. But some of those stories that we've heard lend themselves to trying to, when you would go to my dad and negotiate a bedtime or things like that, it's negotiating against my dad. So it didn't go well most of the time. So, but I learned a lot. So Bernard, our buddy, attorney, husband, dad, papa, friend, mentor, role model, chess player, jazz, R&B, music lover, Steph Curry fan, wonderful human being. Born 87 years ago, Baltimore, Howard undergraduate and law school graduate. We've already covered some of the many things that he accomplished in his career. I did see a quote from President A.P. Carlton at the time when my dad was nominated for the ABA Spirit of Excellence Award. It said, "He has been a very quiet but forceful trailblazer, deliberately and effectively setting an example for others to follow in advancing opportunities for other racially and/or ethnically diverse leaders." He was recognized multiple times for the work that he did to advance labor law in New York, in Michigan, and in the US. Boulay member, definitely high, among other things that he wanted to do. One of the prides and joys were his wife, his kids, and especially his grandkids. He was very proud about being a grandfather, even when they referred to him at times as an ancestor. Father was patient. I remember one time I think it was one of the ABA conferences in New Orleans, and we drove down and we were getting back in the car for one of those host stops along the way from the hotel. And he said, "I think everything's in the trunk. Can you just make sure everything's all good?" And I said, "Okay, all set." And it wouldn't close right away. I couldn't figure out why, and found out that it was a hole in his suit jacket that I put in when I tried to close the trunk. So, but he didn't yell. He held his tongue, as he often does when he might be able to use anger instead, and let me off the hook. So I was grateful for that. I was grateful when my friends that I grew up with didn't yell at me. The one time I tried to add things to my wiffle ball bat and put half of it out through the window in the bathroom in the back, because we were basically the official stadium for our neighborhood in the backyard. He was a man who also wondered why some of us in the backseat of a car would sometimes look at each other and giggle when Dionne Warwick or Nancy Wilson was playing in the car. And he liked to accompany the singers on the cassette tape. And we would try to just let him sing, while I think of other things, and enjoy his time. He helped us get through RPI. He helped us be able to make sure that we were able to get a good start in life after we went to college. And he loved spending time with his colleagues at work, his conference friends, his relay members, and others. He really enjoyed life and his friends and being able to spend time with them. One of my favorite stories, sort of like this too, is at my brother's wedding. He took the time to try and teach my soon-to-be wife how to dance to Push It by Salt and Pepper. Never thought I would see that. And some of my friends that I've hung out with for years, we go on a baseball trip every year. And this one year we were in New York, and we were going to see the Yankees. And they come in from all over the country. And we're walking down the street. Dad's, hi, how are you doing? Oh, pretty good. Everything going so far? Yeah, okay. And it's okay, I'll talk to you later. It's like, do you know he was in town? Like, no. So we're in the middle of New York City. You didn't tell him. You just happened to run into him? And I said, yeah, that's what happens. Like, yeah, that's you. That makes sense. And he also, like I said, one of his passions in life at the end was, not necessarily the end, but over the last few years was spending time reading to and then listening to his grandkids, whether it's writing his letters with a fountain pen, whether it's making weekly phone calls, FaceTime, and you've heard from my two nephews, and if you enjoyed the video, that was Aech. So. Aech knitted this for him, and he enjoyed it every night, making sure he had it. So he's here with us now. A man who I hope understood where I was going to as I recently took a new role and a new career change at Stanford University. And part of the work that I'm doing now is to try to work to make a positive change in the diversity, equity, and inclusion of our community, teaching and research for now and into the future. And to strive to make everyone feel like they belong, where they want to be, and part of the party. And I think in a sense, I think I got that from the work that he did. He's a man who loved life and fought hard to the end. And with the multiple health concerns he was doing, still didn't want to make excuses, still wanted to be places, still wanted to see his kids, still wanted to see his grandkids and be part of their life. And I will truly miss him. But that's his story. And yeah, I know that he's looking at us now and he knows that we've got this. And we're going to move on. And it doesn't mean one thing of him because we know he's here. But we've got this. Thanks.
You don't need it.
Wow. A funny thing happened on the way to Washington, D.C.'s Howard Theater in 1961. After finals at Howard University, Bernard and I found ourselves in our dining hall, chatting and deciding to go down to the Howard Theater to see its current feature bill, basically a jazz show. With Art Blakey, the jazz drummer and band leader, and the Jazz Messengers. Oscar Brown Jr., singer, author, and playwright. Yusef Lateef, American jazz multi-instrumentalist. And that newcomer mentioned, Nancy Wilson. With comedy, listen to this, supplied by Mom's Mabley. How could you not enjoy that show? Yes, we did enjoy the show twice. We slept through the movie. Maybe we saw each other once or twice after that, before and after graduation. Though casually knowing each other and with both of us working in the greater Washington area, Bernard and I met often at social gatherings. After a while, we went on a few dates and discovered we had common interest. And ... The rest is history. In 1963, we married, and shortly thereafter, we moved to Detroit. And in 1971, we moved to Delmar. By then, we were the proud parents of 2 sons, Walter and David. And he's so proud of you today. He is. We have lived in Delmar for 52 years. And yes, as of the day before yesterday, March 23rd, we were married 60 years. As you may have read in the papers, we were happily married for 60 years, busy raising 2 sons, traveling to foreign lands, surviving, becoming empty nesters, sometimes enjoying different careers and volunteer interest. As you saw in the video, good job. Created by the team of Ashe and Aech, our son and granddaughter, Walter and Aech. We enjoyed being a family, all 4 of us, then all 5 of us, then 6 and 7, then 9 of us, and all 10 of us when we included my Aunt Sadie. Walter, David, Ricardo, Miguel, and Aech, each of you and all of you were and are in his heart. He loved you and was so very proud of you from your very first breaths. And if you watched through the video, you saw a lot of baby kissing, peekabooing around backs of chairs, sleeping together, both side by side, even when one was only about 2 months old. Continue to be the offspring he knows you can be. Joe, thank you, Bertina, that you know he loves so very, very much. Shelton and Cecilia, for your love. I've come before you today as one who has lost my best friend, confidant, partner, supporter, and soulmate. I do miss him already. I am thankful for the 60 years of love, companionship, understanding, and support. I have been blessed, and yeah, I know it. My thanks to all of you here today, to the many who have shared reminiscences of the family of lawyers and administrators of NICE, to the many friends and acquaintances who reached out to him for counsel and friendship, to the friends who have reached out to our family during this loss, to the social and church families and friends who have provided multifaceted support at this time. We love you, and we thank each and all of you. Now I'm going to try to read something. If I don't get through this, y'all hope and pray that I make it. But I sincerely believe this. Death is nothing at all. I have only slipped away into the next room. I am I, and you are you. Whatever we were to each other, that we are still. Call me by my old familiar name. Speak to me in the easy way you always used to. Put no difference into your tone. Wear no forced air of solemnity or sorrow. Laugh as we always laughed. and the little jokes we always enjoyed together. Play, smile, think of me, pray for me. Let my name be ever the house soul word that it always was. Let it be spoken without effort, without the ghost of a shadow in it. Life means all that it ever meant. It is the same as it ever was. There is absolute unbroken continuity. What is death but a negligible accident? Why should I be out of mind because I am out of sight? I am waiting for you for the interval somewhere very near, just around the corner. All is well. Nothing is past. Nothing is lost. One bright moment and all will be as it was before. How we shall laugh at the trouble of parting when we meet again.
As I was listening to the words shared today, these words from the Epistle of James came to mind. You must be doers of the word and not only hearers who mislead themselves. Those who hear but don't do the word are like those who look at their faces in a mirror. They look at themselves, walk away, and immediately forget what they were like. But there are those who study the perfect law, the law of freedom, and continue to do it. They don't listen and then forget, but they put it into practice in their lives. They will be blessed in whatever they do. Nearly 26 years I've been in ministry and growing up in the church before that. I've known a lot of people who are really good about showing up on Sunday, and they know all the hymns and the prayers. They sit on a committee or two. And then I've known people who show the fruits of the Spirit in their lives. And sometimes those are the same people. And sometimes it's not the people who show up every week and know all the hymns and pray all the prayers and sit on the committees who show the greatest fruits of the Spirit in their lives. Bernard was someone who lived the Word, who carried the gospel in his heart. And that's more important than any of the other stuff that we do, that we might call church or faith or any of the rest of it. Jesus spent a lot of time talking about how we live it, about what we should be doing. And it looked an awful lot like Bernard's life. Thanks be to God. Let us pray. God of us all, your love never ends. When all else fails, you still are God. We pray to you for one another in our need and for all anywhere who mourn with us this day. To those who doubt, give light. To those who are weak, strength. To all who have sinned, mercy. To all who sorrow, your peace. Keep true in us the love with which we hold one another. In all our ways, we trust you. And to you, with your church on earth and in heaven, we offer honor and glory now and forever. Amen. Receive Bernard into the arms of your mercy. Raise him up with all your people,
Receive us also and raise us into a new life. Help us so to love and serve you in this world that we may enter into your joy in the world to come. Amen. I invite you to rise as you are able as we sing together our closing hymn, number 77. I pray that Please be seated. Join me in an attitude of prayer. Eternal God, we praise you for the great company of all those who have finished their course in faith and now rest from their labor. We praise you for those dear to us whom we name in our hearts before you. Especially we praise you for Bernard, whom you have graciously received into your presence. To all of these, grant your peace. Let perpetual light shine upon them, and help us so to believe where we have not seen, that your presence may lead us through our years and bring us at last with them into the joy of your home, not made with hands, but eternal in the heavens. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Before we dismiss, I want to share the family invites you to join them downstairs in the fellowship hall for a reception, an opportunity to continue to share remembrances and to be in community together. And following the benediction, we'll allow the family to leave first so that they can meet you down there. And then there will be ushers in the hallway to direct you to fellowship hall. And now go forth this day in the assurance of God's presence surrounding you. Go forth this day in the confidence of God's grace in your heart and in your mind. Go forth this day in hope, and go forth this day in peace. Amen.
Amen.